Welcome to the Healing Collective. I have with me the fantastic Dr. Ashley Rodriguez. I am so excited. We connected some time ago. So, Dr. Rodriguez, how are you doing? How's it going? And what is up with you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Who are you, Dr. Rodriguez? Tell me a bit about who you are.
Sure. So I am a Latina licensed psychologist. I identify as Eurekan. My family is from Puerto Rico and I was born and raised in New York, and I very much live in the in-between. In my private practice, I see individuals and families focusing on perinatal mental health, life transitions, trauma, things of that nature. And through
Mhm.
Pathbreak, I offer coaching and digital resources to support and promote healing for women of color.
Okay. Now, when you said New Eurekan, what does that mean? That's a connection between the New York in you and the Puerto Rican in you? Is that what that?
Exactly. It's not being Puerto Rican enough when I'm over there, and when I'm here,
Oh.
people know that my family is from somewhere else.
Okay, gotcha. So tell me, how did you come about in the healing space, or what drew you to intergenerational trauma?
Right.
What drew you to that path?
Well, my family had a really tough transition coming to New York. There was a lot of violence, addiction, poverty, adversity, and
Mhm.
resilience. And so, looking
Mhm.
at my family, when I think about it, a lot of the work that I'm doing now is work that I wish they had access to when they came
Mm.
here to support them. In addition to that, my mom was a substance abuse counselor. And so growing up, I was born and raised in East Harlem, and there are a lot of substance programs there. A lot of her clients would leave Rikers and end up in one of her programs, and we would bump into clients all the time.
Oh,
And they were
wow.
always so excited to see her and give her life updates. So growing up, I saw that impact she had, and I really
Mhm.
wanted to do something similar. My hope was to do something, hopefully, to prevent or to help somebody before they end up in the corrections system, which is why I
Okay.
ended up focusing on children and parenting.
Okay, so where I see in your bio that you had some time in child welfare, were you involved or did you work there? You noticed during your work there that you saw how some of this, what I grew up hearing as generational curses, how
Mhm.
they're being passed down. What's your take on that?
So, in the psychology world, I learned about intergenerational trauma, but it didn't click until I worked in child welfare. I was
Okay.
doing dyadic therapy, and part of the dyadic therapy was doing, and dyadic just means you're working with the parent and the child. Part of the assessment was getting the parents' trauma history. And when I sat down with some parents, and a lot of these parents had quite the reputation. The foster care mother or the foster care social worker had a lot of feelings about some of these parents. And so I already had this I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I was sitting
Right.
with them. And as I started to just be curious and explore their upbringing and some of the things that they experienced, it all clicked for me and it made sense. That was when I realized, okay, this is what that is. This is what a generational curse is. This is what generational
Mhm.
trauma is. This is how it passed down.
Now, when you say passed down, I've also heard some theories or teachings about
Mhm.
how it can be in utero, like the generational curses or trauma is passed down from the womb to the child. What do you think about that?
I think it's passed down in a lot of different ways, and
Mhm.
in utero it is one of the ways. I think in pregnancy, because
Right.
I work with a lot of pregnant women, that time oftentimes you end up naturally thinking about your upbringing and
Mhm.
what went well and what didn't go well. And so a lot of parents with trauma histories end up sometimes reflecting on that, and the parents that I work with a lot of times are the parents that want to do different, that want to
Okay.
parent differently, and they don't know what that looks like. And so that
Mhm.
pregnancy, there's a lot of vulnerability that comes up. But
Yes.
for parents that are not as aware or are not ready to face some of the things that they experienced in childhood, I think it naturally can just pass down because they aren't doing that work, that intentional work.
Why do you think this piece is so powerful? This intergenerational trauma, or not the intergenerational trauma piece, but why do you think it's so powerful to stop this from being passed down?
I think a lot of these curses, like the way that we usually say, or the chains, when they go
Yes.
unspoken, they continue and
Okay.
they shape everything in a way that we aren't thinking about because it's just the norm. It's like the elephant in the room, but there's a power in naming something or in addressing something and giving it a label, because it shows that then that actually isn't the way our family wants to be. That actually isn't our norm. That was something that we learned to adapt. That was something that we learned to cope. And for one generation, or maybe a couple of generations that faced a lot of adversity, it kept them safe. Right now, it might be holding us back. So by naming it and labeling it and working on it, we're able to find what works for us in these current times.
So having a label on it is important. I like how you said about the naming of the thing, because as you mentioned before, sometimes the parents just don't have a name for it.
Right.
And so having a name for a certain trauma can help to eliminate it. They can then address it.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, there's such an importance in just having a language. I think so often we know something is off, or like in our body, if you're very attuned to your body, you know something is going on, but without the language or without the words, it's hard to address it.
Now, speaking of language, you work with clients that English is not their native language. Is that correct? Or
yeah, I work with Spanish speaking families. I also work in Spanglish a lot. I work with a lot of people that are maybe second or third generation, and there's some phrases that just don't translate well, so they'll go back into Spanish. Interestingly, because I do a lot of dyadic and family work, I also work with the children that were raised here and the parent that wasn't. And there's like a translating between the two of them, not only in language, but also in like cultural values and cultural norms. So yes, but I also work in English as well.
back to the children who are translating. How does that work for you, especially when you're talking about counseling those kids and those parents and doing family counseling? How does that work in terms of helping them to be freed from the trauma? How do you get that across?
Part of it is being able to hold both sides.
Okay.
So there's this, like I was saying, that there's a dance, there's a translation of, for this child, it was experienced this way and they may feel this way. And for the parent, they felt this way, and helping the other see the other's point of view. I think a lot of the work that I've done, there's been a need to hold the parent really in the guilt or the shame or whatever intense feeling, the rage, the resentment that may come up when trauma happens, because as a parent, you feel sometimes responsible or you feel guilty that this happened to your child. And when we feel something very intensely, sometimes in a way to protect ourselves, we end up trying to avoid it. Or maybe we try to suppress it or minimize it. And then that's invalidating for the child. And so by holding the parent, we give the parent more space to also hold the child in mind.
Now, when you talk about the parents and their history and their trauma, I know certain things worked for me as a parent and how I was parented. And of course, it's natural for me to use those parenting skills for my child. How does that work with your clients? Because even though it's natural for me to use those parenting skills, but I've learned that the things that worked for me did not work for him. So what do you think about that? And how do you address that with parents who, maybe taking a belt against the child's head or they had one, back in my day, it was an extension cord. Now, I'm not going to say it worked. I don't believe it did, but they believed it did. But I knew that would not work for my child. How do you address some of that type of trauma with your clients?
One, it's challenging. So just validating for a parent, what do you want to be your parenting style? What do you want your parenting values to be? What are your hopes for this child? And then by getting clear on that, then we can sort of, it's almost like reverse calculating. Okay, so you want your child to be respectful and to contribute to society. How do we then parent in a way that there's also something, part of what you said, there's the need to tailor them to this child. Every child is different. And so thinking about their temperament, thinking about their personality, thinking about them in a unique way, as opposed to this is how I parent universally, is going to be more effective. I've worked with parents that, the first child's maybe is very calm and very easy. The second child's a little rambunctious, and they're like, oh, what to do? I didn't have to think about some of these things with the other child. And so it's always remembering every child is different, and you're a different parent for each child as well. You're in a different situation. You're in a different space, right? And so thinking about that too. Sorry.
You're right. Being a different parent for each child. So have you noticed or have you witnessed that as the parent learns more and more about the trauma and learn more and more about how to cope with their trauma, that they apply a different set of rules to different children? If I'm making sense with my question.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of the hope, that we can sort of unlink those past traumas from what's currently happening. What I see without that awareness is that there's this repetition of things. It's an enactment in some ways of things that they've experienced in the past with this current child that may be triggering them, that may be bringing up some of the unresolved childhood trauma. And with the awareness, then there's more ability to pause, to take a step back, and to think about what's going on here. What does this child need? What do I need in this moment? And then able to parent appropriately from there.
Okay. Now let's talk about your legacy reset. What is that and what does it look like?
So it's a group coaching program. The idea is that a lot of the patients that I work with are honestly navigating very similar things. So thinking about how their family history impacts them, thinking about how to have healthy relationships with trauma histories, thinking about how to assert themselves and honor their boundaries. And so my hope is to get people together and do that work together, supporting each other. And it's a mix of information, education, and skills as well.
How's it going so far?
I think part of it, the hardest part, is getting a sense of what people are looking for, because everybody is in a different place in their healing journey. And so a lot of it has been influenced by my clinical work. And I really think it's important to bring in community in shaping the program. So I'm looking for more feedback to shape it into what people actually need, instead of dictating this is what you need, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Now, is the program voluntary or involuntary?
It's voluntary.
Okay. Now, have you worked with clients either in Legacy Reset or just individually, where they've come to you, they're paying to come to you, but they're still not willing to come to terms with their trauma?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And part of it, I think, is that it's too overwhelming. It's too scary. What would it mean about me, about the people that raised me, about the people that have hurt me? For me to admit the things that have happened and call them for what it is.
Beyond the practical steps or beyond the self-validation, what do you use to help people heal on their own terms, in their own way?
The self-validation is really important. I also believe in really mapping family patterns. So I love doing a genogram or just a regular family tree, and not just, who's related to who, but, who were considered the problem children, who were the ones that challenged things, and what were their reputations in the family. What did you learn from all of these family members? Because I work with a lot of Latino patients then who migrated here. And what was that like? And why was that? And thinking of the cultural piece as well. So that family mapping, I think, often brings up a lot, and it puts things into perspective. And I also work a lot with values. What are your values? What's important to you? And in that, there's a need to separate sometimes what was pushed on you maybe, or what was important to your family, what was important to your community versus what's important to you. How do we separate? And if some of it is the same, great, but sometimes it isn't. And so defining that for you.
Okay. And how do you separate? How do you help the clients to separate what you just talked about? How do you do it? Practical steps.
Yeah, I think part of it is putting into context.
Okay.
Right. So let's say, one cultural value may be family first.
Okay.
Well, where did that come from? Was your family in danger at one point? Or did your family have to rely on each other? Now that value makes sense because that was a way that they coped with what they were facing. What about you? What are your circumstances? And where do you want family to be in that? So you can value family and also value your personal interests and your personal desires and wants. And how can we balance that? So part of it, I think, is really figuring out where the value comes from and what is the purpose of it? What does it do?
Now, with your path break coaching and counseling, you aim to change family legacy. So, what bigger systemic shifts do you think are needed to make the intergenerational healing accessible? I mean, far beyond the one-on-one therapy sessions.
I mean, systemically, we need to, one, care about parental mental health. I think maternal mental health is just getting some attention. Finally, people are starting to realize maybe we should take care of our mothers. I work with a lot of families, and I see that a lot of fathers don't have as much space when we're thinking about pregnancy and postpartum as well. So thinking about the family as a unit, I think systemically, we just need more access, more resources. And I personally am really interested in liberation psychology and decolonial psychology. And I think it's really important that we think about all of those factors, right? That all the levels of trauma that families are facing and are impacted by.
Let's go back to that. What did you call it? The colonist
Decolonial.
Decolonial.
Yeah.
Yes, psychology. Let's talk. I know we don't have much time, but I want to touch briefly on the decolonial psychology because I keep wanting to say decolonization.
Which,
but
yeah, that's the act of it. Yeah.
right. So tell me what's happening. What are you witnessing as we actually faced it, especially in this current climate where, the racism is, in my book, is just up again. How are you helping clients to navigate what's going on now and decolonize from some of this thinking that has been passed down, especially in this country?
Right now, I think any kind of difference, any kind of other is really dangerous, there's a lot of messaging about what that means, and it's been normalized. The hatred has been normalized. So there's just so much messaging out there about what it means to be other, to be different. And so in therapy with me, we're talking about that. We're talking about what is it like to hear on the news the way that some of your groups, some of your identities are being discussed, all of the social media and what we're seeing. And a lot of my clients have been just really angry during this time, understandably. And so it's putting that anger also into context. This is not just anger at the current situation. This is also a reaction of all of the ancestral and historical trauma that we've experienced. All of our identities are being attacked. So in thinking about decolonial psychology, we're thinking about the colonized self, which is the way that we've internalized all of the beliefs, all of the actions that are considered okay, right? And then the decolonial self, how do we authentically be ourselves? And how do we feel more in tune with our body? How do we listen more into our intuition? How do we connect more with our historical resilience and strength as well? And not only think about the historical trauma, but also thinking about the wisdom that was passed down too.
And because of this current climate, are you seeing a lot of that? Are you dealing with a lot of clients who are, as you've said, angry, who are angry? And what are you doing specifically to help them navigate these, what I call hateful waters?
Yeah. Part of it is, especially with social media. Social media has been coming up a lot because it is so easily accessible, and we're just seeing all kinds of hateful messages on social media. So part of it is thinking about, how much do you want to be on social media? How much do you want to watch the news? And how do we balance being in the know, because so much is happening so quickly? So like a need to know what's going on to protect ourselves. And also, how do we take care of ourselves? How do we recharge? How do we create community and have relationships that also pour back into us? So there's this need to balance, and for every client it's different. There's some clients that like are not watching the news at all, and when something big happens, they will find a way to find out. They don't need to hear it in that way. There are other clients that are really keeping up with the things that are coming out, and so it's what works for you, and auditing also your energy when you're doing these things, and what's coming up for you, and listening to your body.
I like that last part, auditing your energy. I don't think people do that enough. I don't think they're aware, they're in tune with their energy and all of that. I don't think, I don't think we've been taught how to listen to ourselves. But that
Absolutely.
is, yes, that's a very, very good point. Last question before we wrap up. Appreciate your time despite all of the hiccups that we've had this morning. Can you share a story or even maybe your own journey about or how and where you saw that powerful moment of healing ripple out and truly break a cycle for future generations? Like, what
I
did it feel like? What did it look like?
I was working with a family for almost 3 years in dyadic therapy. Well, I actually worked with both the parents and their children. And both parents had quite the trauma history. It was a lot of relational trauma. And they really didn't want to pass that down, but they didn't know what that would look like for their children. So I worked with them when they had their first child, then they had their second child. We were still working together. And the moment where I realized, okay, we're breaking the cycle, they were in the waiting area. There was another new family that the mother was quite anxious, and the father didn't know how to support the mom. And I witnessed both parents supporting and mentoring that family. And it was such a gift to see all the ways that they were able to share all the lessons that they've learned. And so the father was, normalizing for the other father the things that come up, and wanting to be responsible and wanting to be a provider, and also wanting to be present, and his experience. And then the mom was labeling like, this is anxiety, and baby blues is common. And like, if it's past 2 weeks, you want to speak to someone about that, and it's okay to talk to someone. And I remember just witnessing it and wanting to cry of just gratitude. And it just showed that like we were having these conversations, and I already saw in their parenting the way the work was shaping their parenting, but the way they also were able to give back to the community and give back to another family was just so beautiful. It was not even just affecting their family, it was also impacting other families.
Thank you for sharing that. Even as you said, you feel like you wanted to cry,
Yeah.
I was like, because that truly is a ripple effect. And to
Yeah.
me, that's how emotional healing is supposed to work. As you heal, and you share how you've healed, you kind of spread it out to other people. So that is
Exactly.
a very, very beautiful story. Thank you so much, Dr. Ashley, for sharing, for joining me on this podcast and sharing your history and sharing your work with intergenerational trauma. Before we close, if it's one thing that you would like to leave with the audience, one simple healing trick or healing method in terms of trauma, especially those who are not in therapy. What's
Mm.
something, I know the first thing, because I would say it too, get into some therapy. But for
Mhm.
those who are resistant, but they still want to be helped, what advice would you give them?
I would say I know therapy can be intimidating, so let's just normalize that. But work on finding a way to be still with yourself. That can be journaling, that can be therapy, can be meditation, whatever it looks like for you. It's becoming more comfortable with being with yourself. And I think by doing that, you will then get to a place where you can commit to different healing practices, and therapy is one of them. I know there are also lots of other healing practices that resonate more with people, and that's okay too. But yeah, it's like my favorite quote: be like the turtle at ease in your own shell.
Oh, I like that. Be like the turtle at ease in your own shell. I'm gonna have to use that.
You got it.
Again, thank